Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello everybody, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Jay Weidner, and if I didn't pronounce that correctly, I'll ask him to correct me on that in a moment here. But we're going to be talking about Sacred Mysteries, The Cross of Mende, Alchemy, Kubrick's Oddity, a lot of things that he's spent a lot of time researching. Jay, he's written a couple of books at least. He's put out several films. You can reach his website at www.jayweidner.com. That's JAYWEIDNER.com. And he has links to all his movies and books located on that site. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody that's listening at Shoutcast or iTunes or somewhere else, smartphones, wherever it might be, that you can call in at 832-632-7904. And don't forget to pass the link around, folks. So, Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on my show. When I saw your book over there on Amazon and went to your website, I was like, well, here's a man that's into some really interesting things that I'd like to learn a little bit more about, and I'm pretty sure my listeners would like to learn a little bit more about. For example, I know Sacred Mysteries is something that, well, it's kind of like a buried tradition that's just now coming to the surface. At least it seems to me like Gnosis and Alchemy and Hermetics has been kind of like taboo for so many years that it's just now starting to, make it around. So I take it you've studied these here, shall we say, streams quite in depth?
Well, I mean, I've read a lot of books, that's for sure, and I've been at it a long time, and I guess after a while, you begin to become an expert at it. I don't know if anyone can be an expert at it. I've been called an expert. I'm not sure I am. I consider myself a student of esoteric and sacred arts, and probably always just be a student. It is one of the most fascinating subjects in the human endeavor, and it's endlessly educationable, and I think that's what I like best about it. And it changes the way that you see the world, and the way that you see people, and the way that you see history and time. And at a certain point, when you study traditions from the esoteric realm, you begin to realize that the greatest change agent that a person can become is to try to affect change on the level of how people think, and then and try not to take credit for anything that occurs. And if you take that kind of prescription in mind, I think that a person can have a large effect on things. So I've kind of chosen a path of the hermit or hermetic path, which is the hermit is generally a person who's considered to live alone. But in the old days, the hermit was actually the village shaman, and he would wander around and affect things. He would change the environment of the town by suggestion and introduction, and then he would move on to the next place. And he never took credit for anything that he did, and people frequently didn't realize what he had done. And so today we don't live in small villages; we live in a global network, and so now we have to change things in a positive way. But we can't just go in and run around and tell people what to do, because that won't work.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to suggest things in articulate fashion, and then let the seed sprout, and know that the seed will sprout. So it's really a planting process. And what we're in right now is the beginning stages of a kind of a collective awakening, and this is caused by the internet and other things. And this is going to really speed up the things that are the changes and the new perceptions of reality that are about to begin. And the internet has freed this up, and there's no escaping it. And the powers that be are running interference, but it's not going to work forever. And so soon, we're going to know a lot more about things around us than any humans have ever known, and it's going to be very quickly here. And so I'm interested in those things. I'm interested in how esoteric traditions affect the world today, and how we can bring some of these traditions back into the forefront, which is what I'm trying to do with my company, Sacred Mysteries, at sacredmysteries.com, in which we teach how to, the luminous body, the secrets of alchemy, the afterlife, that there's no death, that we're infinite creatures, that there's a lot of manipulation going on. We have films by David Icke and Alberto Villoldo and Alex Gray and Neil Donald Walsh and a whole plethora of great teachers. And we're presenting these teachings in a video format because we believe that's the most user-friendly format available today outside of the internet. And we also have a channel on the internet, Sacred Mysteries TV on YouTube, which has over 400 free videos of most of the top esoteric teachers that are alive today. And so I guess my work got started about 20 years ago now, or 25 years ago now, when I discovered a cross in the south of France called the Cyclic Cross of Henday. And inscribed on this cross was a depiction of what would occur at the end of this cycle. And this cycle is now coming to an end. It's a period, an era, a time period.
Okay.
Coming to an end right now. As we speak, it is coming to an end. And a new one's beginning, overlaid right over the top. And that's what's causing all the confusion, and it's going to continue to cause confusion, and it's going to cause economies to flounder and disappear and be recreated, and you're looking at the most incredible change in human history, and it's happening right in front of us.
That's where I heard about the Cross of Henday. Pardon me. 'Tis the season. I got a little frog in my throat there. But yeah, I heard about it in relation to the Mayan calendar. Now, this Cross of Henday, isn't it supposed to appear in the constellations up in the sky or out in space?
No. The Cross of Henday is a monument which was built by some advanced group of people who seem to understand astrophysics and astronomy and a lot of things that seem rather improbable that they could possibly understand, and more in advance in some ways than we are right now. It was built 400 years ago, and it's describing a cyclic catastrophe that has to do with the sun. And it's apparently the sun is going to go through some change. Interestingly enough, there's a report that came out, I think, yesterday, that the sun has gone through a huge and strange change in the last 18 months, and particles are coming out of the sun which actually cause genetic mutations here on Earth, and the heliosphere, which is the sheath which protects the Earth from cosmic rays, is starting to disappear. And scientists are beginning to speculate that the sun is dying, literally dying, and becoming a red giant. Now, if that's true, then that changes the interpretation that I previously had on the cyclic cross of Henday, in which I said that it periodically lets out solar flares. But it could be also said that the prediction of the cyclic cross of Henday is saying that the sun is going to grow. If you look at the inscription of the sun on the cross at my website, jweidner.com, you can see that the sun in the inscription is growing. It's also an angry sun. Well, that could be a red giant. And also, there's 4 stars or planets around the angry sun, and the red giant, if the sun did turn into a red giant, which is where it starts burning up the helium gases, it would envelop, in fact, the first 4 planets in the solar system.
Ouch.
So that was a little bit troubling, and how someone 400 years ago could have built a monument that described an event like that coming is another thing that is I cannot answer. But anyway, that's how I got started in all this, and once I realized that there were a group of people at least 400 years ago who were extremely advanced, and I knew it after I interpreted the cyclic cross of Henday, that's what sent me out into the world, knowing, having a box of tools, you might say, that most researchers don't have. And inside my box of tools was absolute confirmation that there was a group of people living here with us who are much more advanced than we are and are hiding everything from us in various kinds of ways. At that point, I could see the fingerprints of these people everywhere, and have continued to expose those fingerprints whenever I can.
You mean like the fingerprints of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and Morgans, etc.?
Well, no, actually not. Those guys are just pipsqueaks, actually, compared to what I'm finding. They're probably just their managers.
Ah.
The creatures, the beings that I'm talking about have knowledge of maybe 100,000 years of human history, maybe 500,000 years of history and science. They're extremely advanced. They live here with us, and they have for thousands of years. You can call them the custodians or whatever. And they've been messing with us, and they're controlling us, and they're the ones who created our religions and created our political systems and created our banking systems. And so the people you mentioned, well, they're there and they're real, but they're not the ones who are running the show at the very top. They're managing the show for a much more nefarious group who basically has enslaved the entire human race.
Okay,
and
now
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there. Now I was just wondering, now these beings you're referring to, are they ET in origin?
No, they're humans. They're our cousins. I call them crypto-terrestrials. Crypto meaning secret, and they're humans, but they're different. They broke away from us hundreds of thousands of years ago, and became different, and they look different than us. They have gray, white skin and slanted eyes, and some are tall and some are short, and they have flying saucers, and they have been, screwing with our
heads.
Race. Our cousin race has been screwing with our race for at least 6,000 years. And they've created the untenable situation that we find ourselves in right now. They, until we realize that this is going on and find a way to remove ourselves from this influence, we're always going to be the seriously deluded and dumbed down race of people that we've become.
Okay, now in the chat room, Jennifer was asking, what do you think about the Mayans that, for some odd reason we can't find a single bone, but only their pottery?
Oh, no, that's not true. The Mayan people still live in the Yucatan. I've been there hundreds of times. No, the Mayan people didn't disappear. They abandoned their cities. And that was probably more of an ecological disaster, over-farming, causing erosion of the fields, causing sudden starvation, causing the mass migration out of the cities. But no, the Mayan people did not disappear. They're still there.
Okay. So she probably had a misunderstanding about that part then. Maybe because they just abandoned the cities and nobody, mentioned where they went. It was just kind of like an assumption. Who knows? But now, I know that I've studied some Hermeticisms, and I never really made the connection you did earlier about a hermit and Hermeticism. I always connected it to Hermes, also known as Thoth. But,
it's the same connection because the hermits named themselves after Hermes.
Which explains why they started calling themselves hermits, which I always wondered how that name got, you could call them loners or anything you want. Why call them a hermit? It never, made sense until you said that, in other words. But, come to think of it, I've heard tell that, anybody that really makes a connection to God ends up having a period of being a hermit where they, like Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. I think Apostle Paul went somewhere and fasted 40 days, and so did Moses, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a long-standing tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, I think people who get involved in this kind of study eventually realize that the clanging and the clamor of urban life interferes with the meditative process, and they become hermits. Some for a limited period of time, some for the rest of their lives, and it just comes kind of with the game. At first, you want to tell people and you want to go out in the world, but then you realize that really isn't going to work, and so you have to find. You either go in and become alone and work on yourself, or you do what I was suggesting earlier, which is you quietly move from spot to spot, raising the vibration of the situation at every turn. There's a wonderful French movie, I forget the name of it now, I think it's called like Amiel or something, it came out about 10 years ago, and it's about a girl in a little village, and she causes good things to happen all around her while never, ever taking any of the credit, without anyone ever knowing that she even was doing it. So she sees that this woman is attracted to this guy, and she sees that the guy is attracted to the woman, but they're both too afraid to break the ice and talk to each other. So she writes a note to the guy from the woman, signs it with the woman's name, and slips it to the guy. And then that forces the guy to meet the woman, and pretty soon they're married and they have kids. And it's a wonderful movie, and it's exactly what the hermits would do. They would sort of like Gandalf. They would manipulate the situation, which Gandalf is clearly doing in Lord of the Rings, but to the betterment of the situation.
That was interesting. And I was thinking to myself that if somebody was an immortal and they didn't want the rest of the world to know about it, becoming a hermit for periods of time would be a wonderful way to keep that fact hidden. When you've been around too long in one place, you go off in the desert somewhere, give yourself a little time, pop up elsewhere with a whole new entire identity, and you could go around for who knows how long and nobody even know that, you were an immortal, in other words.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think that's exactly what it is. And a hermit and hermeticist and alchemy are all the same, and they're all associated with the Philosopher's Stone and the immortal elixir of life. And it's very likely that the hermits were indeed long-lived people who had to choose that kind of lifestyle to avoid getting caught by kings and popes and politicians who would like to get that elixir of life. So yeah, there's a lot to that, and it's still going on today. There's still hermits and people walking among us right now. It never went away. It just got quiet, that's all.
It makes a lot of sense.
For instance, at the Constitutional Convention, the famous story that it was about breaking up over big, huge arguments about slavery, and a gentleman, a European-dressed gentleman who was in the gallery, stood up and made a short 5-minute speech about how important it was for America to stay together and to keep united, and it was one of the most stirring speeches given during the whole thing, and the guy got up and walked out, and no one ever saw him again, and they voted the Constitution in right after that. So we can see that there's still the fingerprints of this group moving through our history.
Okay. Also, in the chat room, James was asking, when Jay talks about alchemy, is he literally talking about transmuting one element into another, or is it some other New Age spiritual type of thing? No,
not. There's really nothing really all that spiritual about alchemy. I can't really think of anything spiritual about it. What alchemy is it's simply alchemy answers the question, is it possible to concentrate chi or life energy and then ingest that concentration? So, is that possible? And the answer from alchemists is yes. It is possible to concentrate chi and then to concentrate it and then to ingest that concentrated chi, and in that you will then not have the need for food. You will your aging will reverse. You will feel incredibly calm because you're not worried about a quick end to your life, and that's all it is. Now, what comes from that is spiritual, because once you have achieved, say, a 200 or 300 or 400 year lifespan, you have to come to grips with some things. The first thing that you have to come to grips with is that you don't want bad guys to get a hold of it, because who wants to have a Mao Zedong alive for 500 years? All right, that's the first thing that happens when you discover this elixir, this
yeah, imagine if Hitler lived 500 years.
Yeah, and so then the second thing that you start thinking about is your own life, because every rich person, every ruthless person is going to want to steal that from you if they find out you have it. Okay? Now you're really getting good reasons to become a hermit. Okay? So then you think about the third ramification of it. You say, okay, I'm going to be alive for 500 years. I can't tell anybody I've got this, because they will tell a bad person who will come kill me, so I got to keep it completely quiet. And I can't ever let anybody know either. They'll throw me in jail until I tell the secret. So I have to keep that completely quiet. Then the last thing that happens is, okay, now I've got 500 years, and I have to keep quiet about what I'm doing here. I can't really tell anybody what I'm doing. What do I do? And then your life will take a turn towards the spiritual, because you will begin to ask yourself the big questions, and you will have the time to look into that, and eventually you will create a spiritual life for yourself, because that's the only satisfying life that there is.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you about that. I've seen other lifestyles. I come from a Orthodox Christian background, but I've went into more the alchemical and spiritual end of it because it was, more fulfilling. Now, I don't know if you're going to really know an answer to this question that Jennifer asked, but she's expressed an interest before in the NWO and Phil Snyder, and I imagine by now just about everybody's almost has heard about him, but she wants to know what you think about the reference that Phil Snyder made when he stated in a reunion saying that he was invited to a private UN meeting, and when he went there and landed up, sitting in front of 4 7 feet tall 7 feet grays for this NWO.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're trying to say, do you think he really did, or, you know?
Oh yeah. I believe Phil Schneider. I don't know why he would lie. Furthermore, Phil Schneider completes a circle that seems to get started every time people go down this path, is in the fact that he ended up dead. And this is Mac Tonnies. That's Mac, M-A-C, last name Tonnies, T-O-N-N-E-S. He wrote a book called Crypto-Terrestrials, which gets into the science of this group and proof of their existence. And unfortunately, he died at 34 years old, right before that book was published. There's a lot of people who seem to meet an early demise when they begin talking about these guys, and I probably should be worried about it myself. I'm just sick of the manipulation, and so I continue to talk about it. But Phil Schneider, yeah, he had gotten a firefight with these guys under Dulce in New Mexico, and showed his scars and everything, and then he went home, and a burglar broke into his house and he killed him. And so, you know, it's very troubling, and it's a troubling thing. And it's Weidner's first law is any ideas. The more suppressed an idea is, the more closer to the truth it is. And that's not it. I have it on my website. I can't remember what exactly the law is,
right.
But if something is not allowed to be talked about, then that's where you've got to go. That's where the suppression is. And Phil Schneider
was pushing the wrong buttons
about these guys, and it's not allowed. It's just not allowed, and they're real. And people who think they're not real, I don't know what to say to you. You need to go read The Gods of Eden by William Bramley.
Actually, I did.
Yeah,
I read all of Sitch's work. I read Bromley's work. I've read. I'm working on Tony Stubbs' All About Control just today.
Yeah, and you know, once you understand that this group's here, then you realize that they're master manipulators, and they make up things for us, and they make up apparitions. They make up religions. The Pharaoh Akhenaten is generally credited with creating monotheism, or the belief that there's only one single God, and his name is Yahweh, or whatever his name is. And Akhenaten got this idea by his own words while walking down along the Nile River one day, when a bright disk in the sky stopped over the Nile and talked to him, I guess in Egyptian, and told him that he was to start a one-world monotheistic religion and to kill and destroy all the other religions in Egypt and the world. So Akhenaten then went and created a big army and went and killed all the polytheistic and all the other religions that were everywhere around him, creating a backlash which eventually ended up with his own ouster and probably his son King Tut's murder. So we can then advance forward 3,000, 2,500 years or whatever, and we come to, you know, the story of this shepherd boy in Arabia who enters into a cave to get out of the rain. And he goes into the cave, and he meets a tall, white, luminous being. And this luminous being tells him to go out and with sword and horse and kill everybody who doesn't believe in this religion that he just learned about in the cave. And so this boy, not little, he's an older boy, who's actually considered to be the village idiot, by the way, goes home and he tells his family about what happened. And he says it was a demon that came in. It was in the cave. The demon was in the cave, and it told me all this. the family, seeing the cachet in this story, told him no, it wasn't a demon. It was the angel Gabriel. And so he said, oh, it was? And they said, yeah. And so he then wrote down every single thing verbatim. He could remember verbatim every single thing that this strange being in the cave told him. And that became the Quran. And he was Muhammad. And he went out with an army and began killing and murdering everybody in all directions who would not believe in his God, just like Akhenaten before. And we can see that this is a continuous story of bizarre intervention by beings who want to establish a theocracy in which they are the single God.
And then they got little people like the Rothschilds working as their, front men, managers,
Yep.
etc.
That's right. That's what they're doing. They're shielding them. Rothschild means red shield. They're the shield. The original name was, I'm going to completely blow it here and forget the original, Bauer. The original name for the Rothschild family was Bauer. They changed it, Amschel Rothschild changed it to Rothschild, which means red shield. Now, here's what's interesting. These creatures, these are cousins, these cryptos, whatever you want to call them, they don't have any hair on their head. That's one of the things that marks them. They don't have any hair on their head. They have the slanted eyes. They have the very thin mouth. They can be 10 feet tall and they can be 4 feet tall. They have different sizes of them. But they do have pubic hair, and their pubic hair is always red.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also in the chat room, we got the question out there about what year was that Muhammad founded the Muslim religion.
620, I think, something like that, 80, somewhere around there.
I'm not real good with that kind of stuff, to be honest with you.
Somewhere
But
in the 600s. Somewhere in the 600s. It's worse than that. I mean, I don't want to trash people's religions. I really don't. I'm just trying to tell you guys the truth. I'm not trying to say. I'm just saying there's one of the problems when Saint Paul began selling the Christian ministries after he fell off the horse, he realized that he was having a lot of trouble selling the story, and he or someone began creating that Jesus was born of a virgin, okay, and that a being had impregnated his mom, and that's why he was a special baby, okay. Now this is an ancient and old story. This is only the Jesus version is only the 800,000th of this version, and Andrew Collins in his book From the Ashes of Angels goes into this in a really good fashion. But these magical children were the result of sex between these crypto-terrestrials and humans, and they created babies they had the advanced DNA or something, I guess you could say, of these our cousins. And they became, they had really seriously high IQs, which is one of the traits of these crypto-terrestrials, and they would always invariably become the leaders of the village or the town or whatever. And also, because they had strange qualities of very white skin and pale eyes and blonde and white hair, they became in some ways the chief procreators too of these villages because they were so bloody attractive, and so the cryptos had a law. The crypto-terrestrials had a law. They were not to have sex with humans, and they broke that law and created hybrid humans who are smarter than other humans. And they walk among us, and they are us, and they run companies, and they invent things, and these kind of hybrided humans who are smarter than regular humans are a problem for this group because they're figuring things out, and especially the fact that we are slaves of some silent secret masters.
Okay, now, these here crypto-terrestrials that you're referring to, would they be the Khazars that I read about so much by any chance, just a different name for them?
No, the Khazars are a group of Asian, part Asian, part Caucasian, right on the border between Europe and the East, and they converted to Judaism in 700. And most of the Jews that you see today are not have nothing to do with the Middle East or Israel or anything. They come from northern Turkey, a place called Khazaria, and they ran out of Khazaria in 800 by the Russians, and they were forced into Europe, and they became the Ashkenazi or the European Jews. But no, that's not them. However, and this is very important to note, the area where Khazaria was, which is now Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, northern Turkey, that area, that place is rife with rumors of tunnel systems and cave openings and creatures that live and have lived in the mountains there. These rumors have been around for thousands of years.
Okay. Now, I've had Anthony Sanchez on my show, and I've read his book, UFO Highway. And during his interview with this here Colonel X, one of the things that came up was that we were visited by extraterrestrials who at some point had given birth to a superior race of humans. They weren't called crypto terrestrials in the book, however. They were called Astoras or something like that. But these are like direct descendants of the extraterrestrials, and I was wondering if those two should be equated or kept separate.
No, they're not. They're the same. What happened here is they are in a sense extraterrestrial, and they're also terrestrial. Because what happened is that every few I think it's about every 13,000 years there is a solar storm, which is so huge that it causes havoc here on Earth of such a great degree that it nearly kills everything on Earth. And this happens, 5 times, and every 5th time, which is the one we're heading towards now, it's the worst one of all. So every 60,000 years, there's a gigantic solar storm, which is so bad that almost nothing survives. Okay, so this is a typical periodic thing that has always happened in the history of our solar system. So what happened is that, according to the Indian texts, a couple 100,000 years ago, a group of humans decided that they did not want to die in the storm that was coming, and they left. And they built an outpost on Mars. Now, it sounds crazy, but this is actually in the Purana text from India. And they built giant arks or ships, and they went to Mars, and the storm came, and it wiped out Earth, and I don't know how long they were on Mars. They may have been there for a long time. Either way, they began to develop different propensities than humans. They lost the color in their skin, their brains got bigger, their eyes began to turn blue, and at a certain point they came back. And they came back, and maybe it was like 50 or 60,000 years ago, which is what I think. And they came back here. And they came back here, and they didn't really find it all that appealing. It was hot, and there was too much gravity, and but I think they had to move here because Mars and the rest of the solar system was inhospitable for various reasons, and this is still the most hospitable place in the solar system. So they came here and they lived side by side with us, underground mostly. They had ships. They flew around in them, and they messed with us. And then about 6,000 years ago, they decided to create civilization for some reason. And so they began teaching us agriculture and mathematics and reading, and Graham Hancock has shown this in his book, a great book, classic book, Fingerprints of the Gods, that a group of white-skinned people came to almost every single culture on earth and taught them reading and writing and agriculture and respect for women and all these things, and essentially took us from hunter-gatherers to urban-dwelling agricultural people. Some people would say, well, that's a great thing. Well, I don't share that view. I think that civilization and all this is a bad thing for the human race, and that it's caused us to go and deteriorate. And a grain-based diet, grains all turn into sugar when you eat them, is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. The Paleolithic diet of our forebears before agriculture is the most healthy diet that there is. And so I think that, again, civilization is a nasty crypto trick. And so what is the trick? Well, the trick is how do we get these idiots to be our slaves, to grow food for us, provide sex for us, the whole thing. And they created everything. They created kingships, they created the banking systems, they created wars, they created technologies, they created everything. The religions, everything was created by this group of people. They want you to think that there's hundreds of different races out there, extraterrestrial races, so you'll be all confused about everything, but there isn't. There's just one group, and they are way ahead of us in almost every way, and they're fooling us. And they have robots, and they have biological creatures that they've created, and they use them to always throw us off the dime. That's the key. How can we keep them always off the dime? Look at the story of the Tower of Babel. All the human race gets together. They all speak the same language. They all get along. There's no wars. There's nothing going on. It's just groovy as hell. And they decide they're going to build a big building. And it's incredible, the unity and the cohesion of the human race as they together build the tower. And it pisses the gods off. It pisses them off. And they come in and they wreak anarchy on the human race, and they change their languages, and they sow confusion. And this is supposed to be the good guy. So the Jews want to get out of Egypt, okay? And so Moses, he goes to Jehovah and he says, "You got to help me, man." So how does this wonderful quote God unquote handle the situation? He sends an angel of death in who kills every single one of the eldest sons of every family in Egypt, and only if you put something on your door so the angel knows that you're one of theirs, he won't kill yours. And this is how the event called Passover was created. The angel of death passed over your house and did not kill your son. This is the good guy. I mean, we have a psychopathic entity here, a completely psychopathic entity who's doing everything he can to convince us that all the while that he's beating us with a stick, that he loves us. I'm sorry, I hate to be so shocking. It's just that...
Actually, I wasn't shocked.
I'm like, I've had it with this manipulation. I've just reached the end of it, and so I try to use every circumstance that I can to get, when I'm getting a word out, to get this out. And I know a lot of people find it irritating, but there's a lot of people that it creates a lot of aha moments for them when they realize that everything that we know is just a gigantic manipulation.
This
we don't even know what we know.
This is true. That's what some of my studies have showed, especially within the religious sect. But we got a couple of questions here from Jennifer. Yep. She wanted to know about when Olaf Jansen, and his father lived in the Hollow Earth for 2 years and lived on the territory of the Garden of Eden. Would you say that is where you can find God in this so-called heaven and Garden of Eden? I guess in other words, do you think you can find heaven in the Hollow Earth?
No, and I don't know if the Earth is hollow anyway, but no, heaven is. There is a God. There is a one true God, okay? And he, she, whatever you want to call it, it is the thing that created the universe. And you are it, and every single thing you see is part of it. And it's all one thing. That's why you don't want to have one God, because there's not a God, a single God somewhere. It is all God. Everything is God. One is just God in its different forms. And so there is a God, and you're part of God, and there's no place to go to search for it because you're already there. You just have to find it within yourself, and you can ask for things, and what you're doing is you're creating a reality. That's what praying is doing. But all of the religions of the West, I'm sorry to tell you, are complete fabrications and manipulations with no links to any God that I can think of.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I mean, I will admit that I've seen passages in the Bible that even Jesus himself gave you the true hints when he said things like, I've said it, ye are gods, the kingdom of heaven is within you and without, little things like that. But the church always says, well, you just don't understand those verses, so because they don't want to touch bases. They don't want you looking for God within because they have you looking for a big old God with a thunderbolt dictator up in the sky,
Yeah, a dictator God. That's what they want, and so they want you to have a dictator God, and they want you to be afraid, and that's how they control us. And it's I think it's time to reject all of that and move on to the next thing. I really do. And one thing we have to realize is that the manipulation has been so amazing and so strong that you have to almost throw the book out and start all over with reality.
Right. And, even Jennifer in the chat room was saying that God is energy, which is actually, my understanding is he's conscious thought energy, to be exact. Not some big man sitting on a throne. He's we're more closer to that description than what the church gives than anything else is, in other words.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I was also wanting to talk to you about Kubrick. You went into some detail on your website about Kubrick, and he evidently had a knowledge of some of this himself, if I understand correctly, that was put into a movie or something, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, it's really a whole body of work by Stanley Kubrick is telling pretty much a story that I'm just reciting about the manipulation and the falseness. But in particular, 3 films by Stanley Kubrick are important on this subject. One is his masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. The other is his film, The Shining. And the last is his last film, Eyes Wide Shut. And so you can see that in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the human race is being manipulated by seemingly an alien force. And then we go up to The Shining, and we can see that the human race is being manipulated by a demonic force. And a little bit later in Stanley's life, he seems to be learning as he's going along. And then this last movie, the human race is being manipulated by a Masonic force, which is the group of people that are having the orgy in Eyes Wide Shut. So we can see that he's zeroing in, or he's maybe even giving 3 different aspects of the controllers, right? One is that they're semi-alien, 2, they're semi-demonic, and 3, that they're using things like the Masons to fulfill their agenda. And that is what Kubrick's conclusions were. I made a film which is getting a lot of accolades, called Kubrick's Odyssey, where I prove that Stanley Kubrick, it's the first of a 3-part series in which I prove that Stanley Kubrick was involved in the faking of the Apollo moon landings. I think I pretty much nail it. And the next one, which will be coming out in just a few months, Kubrick the Magician, I will be showing how Kubrick worked in deep esoteric subjects like the ones that we're discussing here into his films, and that's why his films were so transformative. And then in the third one, I'm going to show the world the secret subliminal things that are in Stanley Kubrick's films, and tell the story of what this group is doing to us, this crypto-terrestrial or whatever they are group.
Okay. For some odd reason, I detected a drag while you were speaking. I'm not sure if internet service is starting to slow down today, or there's something on your end. Are you by any chance talking through Skype or?
Nope. That's probably just the people listening.
It very well could be, but it was a very brief drag, and it's already over with. But yeah, we were talking about this in the chat room. But while I was listening to you talking about Kubrick and his Odyssey, I was thinking about Philip Gardner recently came out with a video, or a movie you might want to call it, about Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. And it seems like Lewis, according to Philip Gardner, was doing something similar to what Kubrick was doing.
Yeah, he was. And a lot of artists do things. Mozart, of course, wrote the Magic Flute, and then he died right after it premiered because he was giving away Freemasonic secrets. So you can see that over and over we have these people and what they're doing. And yeah, so artists, people who know what's going on, frequently choose artists, things like that, to do, like Lewis Carroll or Stanley Kubrick, to get the word out so they don't get knocked off.
And yeah, I was just thinking of somebody else. Michael Jackson recently passed away, and I had a guy named Max Tobin and his wife Alana come on, and they wrote a book about him. And according to them, they channeled him, or Alana, I think, channeled him. Somebody did, and the information come down that he was actually murdered behind the fact that he was planning on embedding similar material into some of his future music, in other words.
Yeah. You'll see. Well, yeah, let's just face it. The people that are promoted by the system are anti-human and anti-spiritual. And so they've got to watch it. They can't let anybody out that might slip the right messages through. There's gatekeepers. And the artists know this, and so good artists, that is, sophisticated artists, and so they try to create art that does end run, so to speak, around the powers that be that are in control. And you can see this, the fingerprints of this are everywhere. It's not just Stanley Kubrick or Lewis Carroll or Mozart. Shakespeare is trying to tell you secrets. A lot of people are.
Well, I was just thinking, it seems like, given the fact that what happens to people that are in the public eye when they try to, share this information, perhaps a better way of sharing it would be through more like unknown people that could get around to smaller groups and, before they're detected, in other words, and maybe get it out better.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get the word out. I'm just trying to get this stuff out so that people can change the way that they think. And I think once we get to that point, then they can begin accepting the more, what they now consider probably a little outlandish things that are being said. They can create a landscape where those ideas ferment and take root, and then they're not so outlandish anymore. I know that I would never have dreamed that I would be saying some of the things that I'm saying now 10 years ago, certainly not 20 years ago. But again, I just feel that we have to get this information out in a way that causes real change to occur. Otherwise, we're just going to be caught in a hamster wheel of going around and around.
Yeah, we need to quit looking for God outside and start looking for Him in, and begin to realize that we're all one humanity, one creation, and that you can't really harm one without harming yourself in the same process. If you may not see right then and there, because you can't see the big picture, but somewhere down the line it can usually be revealed to you.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think that it's actually a great place to be right now, and I'm really excited. And I think what you're going to see is, these ideas are really going to start taking hold, and it's going to really change things. But it's still got a ways to go here. We haven't gotten rid of the dependence on materialism and the hold that the crypto-terrestrials have on us and our brains. They've colonized our mind, and we can't even think the right way, but we're getting there. We're not wise, but we're almost there.
Okay. Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you on that. I was going to say that we talked prior in email, and we didn't really discuss if we wanted to do a 1 hour or 2 hour show today. And I've got something come up today that I'm expecting somebody to come over that I wasn't expected before, that should be here soon. So I was going to say, since we've been here about an hour and he's due here any minute, if we could wrap this show for today. And I would love to have you come back again in the future. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think we share a lot of views. I think we could do a lot of good work together to try to help get the word out to people. And I'd love to have you come back if you're interested.
Yeah, no problem. Just give me an email, and I'll work it into my schedule.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jay. And I'm sorry I'm having to put an end to this a little early today, because I think we could have gone on for a bit further. But sometimes you never know when you're going to get a call that something's gone wrong somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
No problem.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right, it's great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
And once again, everybody, I want to remind y'all that I'll be interviewing Anthony Sanchez Monday on the UFO Highway, and he's also got a new workout. I don't have it in front of me, and the word had a unusual pronunciation I can't repeat, but we'll get to that, Monday when he gets here. In the meantime, don't forget to stop by and visit my friends at UPI International, United Paranormal International, and see what you think of them. And don't forget to share my link, paranormalpalace.com. And, folks, I hope y'all come back Monday, and I've enjoyed having you here. I want to thank you. I couldn't have a show without my listeners any more than I could have one without my guests. But for now, I need to step out and take care of some business. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap like I told him. I just wanted to get that in real quick. And don't forget his website. Let me read that off one more time. www.jweidner.com. Thank you, everybody, and y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.
Books, that's for sure, and I've been at it a long time, and I guess after a while, you begin to become an expert at it. I don't know if anyone can be an expert at it. I've been called an expert. I'm not sure I am. I consider myself a student of esoteric and sacred arts, and probably always just be a student. It is one of the most fascinating subjects in the human endeavor, and it's endlessly educationable, and I think that's what I like best about it. And it changes the way that you see the world, and the way that you see people, and the way that you see history and time. And at a certain point, when you study traditions from the esoteric realm, you begin to realize that the greatest change agent that a person can become is to try to affect change on the level of how people think, and then and try not to take credit for anything that occurs. And if you take that kind of prescription in mind, I think that a person can have a large effect on things. So I've kind of chosen a path of what the hermit or hermetic path, which is the hermit is generally a person who's considered to live alone. But in the old days, the hermit was actually the village shaman, and he would wander around and affect things. He would change the environment of the town by suggestion and introduction, and then he would move on to the next place. And he never took credit for anything that he did, and people frequently didn't realize what he had done. And so today we don't live in small villages, we live in a global network, and so now we have to change things in a positive way, but we can't just go in and run around and tell people what to do, because that won't work.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to suggest things in articulate fashion, and then let the seed sprout, and know that the seed will sprout. So it's really a planting process, and what we're in right now is the beginning stages of a kind of a collective awakening, and this is caused by the internet and other things, and this is going to really speed up the things that are the changes and the new perceptions of reality that are about to begin. And the internet has freed this up, and there's no escaping it. And the powers that be are running interference, but it's not going to work forever. And so soon, we're going to know a lot more about things around us than any humans have ever known, and it's going to be very quickly here. And so I'm interested in those things. I'm interested in how esoteric traditions affect the world today, and how we can bring some of these traditions back into the forefront, which is what I'm trying to do with my company, Sacred Mysteries, at sacredmysteries.com, in which we teach how to, the luminous body, the secrets of alchemy, the afterlife, that there's no death, that we're infinite creatures, that there's a lot of manipulation going on. We have films by David Icke and Alberto Villoldo and Alex Gray and Neil Donald Walsh and a whole plethora of great teachers. And we're presenting these teachings in a video format because we believe that's the most user-friendly format available today outside of the internet. And we also have a channel on the internet, Sacred Mysteries TV on YouTube, which has over 400 free videos of most of the top esoteric teachers that are alive today. And so I guess my work got started about 20 years ago now, or 25 years ago now, when I discovered a cross in the south of France called the Cyclic Cross of Henday, and inscribed on this cross was a depiction of what would occur at the end of this cycle. And this cycle is now coming to an end. It's a period, an era, a time period.
Okay.
It's coming to an end right now. As we speak, it is coming to an end. And a new one's beginning, overlaid right over the top. And that's what's causing all the confusion, and it's going to continue to cause confusion, and it's going to cause economies to flounder and disappear and be recreated, and you're looking at the most incredible change in human history, and it's happening right in front of us.
That's where I heard about the Cross of Henday. Pardon me. 'Tis the season. I got a little frog in my throat there. But yeah, I heard about it in relation to the Mayan calendar. Now, this Cross of Henday, isn't it supposed to appear in the constellations up in the sky or out in space?
No. The cross of Henday is a monument which was built by some advanced group of people who seem to understand astrophysics and astronomy and a lot of things that seem rather improbable that they could possibly understand, and more in advance in some ways than we are right now. It was built 400 years ago, and it's describing a cyclic catastrophe that has to do with the sun. And it's apparently the sun is going to go through some change. Interestingly enough, there's a report that came out, I think, yesterday, that the sun has gone through a huge and strange change in the last 18 months, and particles are coming out of the sun which actually cause genetic mutations here on Earth, and the heliosphere, which is the sheath which protects the Earth from cosmic rays, is starting to disappear. And scientists are beginning to speculate that the sun is dying, literally dying, and becoming a red giant. Now, if that's true, then that changes the interpretation that I previously had on the cyclic cross of Henday, in which I said that it periodically lets out solar flares. But it could be also said that the prediction of the cyclic cross of Henday is saying that the sun is going to grow. If you look at the inscription of the sun on the cross at my website, jweidner.com, you can see that the sun in the inscription is growing. It's also an angry sun. Well, that could be a red giant. And also, there's 4 stars or planets around the angry sun, and the red giant, if the sun did turn into a red giant, which is where it starts burning up the helium gases, it would envelop, in fact, the first 4 planets in the solar system.
Ouch.
So that was a little bit troubling, and how someone 400 years ago could have built a model.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Jay Weidner, and if I didn't pronounce that correctly, I'll ask him to correct me on that in a moment here. But we're going to be talking about Sacred Mysteries, the Cross of Henday, Alchemy, Kubrick's Oddity, a lot of things that he's spent a lot of time researching. Jay, he's written a couple of books at least. He's put out several films. You can reach his website at www.jweidner.com. That's JAYWEIDNER.com. And he has links to all his movies and books located on that site. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody that's listening at Shoutcast or iTunes or somewhere else, smartphones, wherever it might be, that you can call in at 832-632-7904. And don't forget to pass the link around, folks. So, Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on my show. When I saw your book over there on Amazon and went to your website, I was like, well, here's a man that's into some really interesting things that I'd like to learn a little bit more about, and I'm pretty sure my listeners would like to learn a little bit more about. For example, I know Sacred Mysteries is something that, well, it's kind of like a buried tradition that's just now coming to the surface. At least it seems to me like Gnosis and Alchemy and Hermetics has been kind of like taboo for so many years that it's just now starting to, make it around. So I take it you've studied these here, shall we say, streams quite in depth?
Well, I mean, I've read a lot of